Welcome back to Cards and Comics. Today I have another vintage card showdown, and this is my first one comparing two position players instead of pitchers. Now, the way the series works is I look at two players that are comparable from a statistical standpoint, but not comparable from a price standpoint. And I go through and see if there's value to be had in players who statistically were maybe superior players, but for whatever reason are underpriced, and therefore in the future, maybe as people look at the value of players and look at statistics and sabermetrics, players like Joe Morgan, in this case I'm looking at Rod Carew versus Reggie Jackson, that maybe a Rod Carew's value goes up over time as people realize how good a player some of these people were. So we'll get into it. Rod Carew versus Reggie Jackson. So career overviews, just highlights. These are the high level, kind of comparable career accomplishments. So Rod Carew was the MVP in 1977. He was an 18-time All-Star. He won 7 batting titles, was the 1967 National League Rookie of the Year, and made the Hall of Fame in 1991. Comparison is that Reggie Jackson was also an MVP in 73. He was a 14-time All-Star. He led the American League in home runs 4 times. He was twice named the World Series MVP, and he was elected in the Hall of Fame in 1993. Now, if you go to baseballreference.com and look at the black ink, gray ink, all the different Hall of Fame metrics, you'll find that actually they're very comparable in terms of all those metrics. So the players themselves are very comparable from a career perspective. And they have very similar credentials on the high level. Now let's get into the stats. And so what I normally do is I take the top 5 seasons from every player and kind of rank them in order based on WAR, and that gives us sort of a one-to-one comparison, because to make the Hall of Fame in general you have to have at least 5 great years. In my Sandy Koufax video, that's kind of what I pointed out is, he was known to be amazing for 5 years, and so it's kind of that 5-year test. Now, in this case, Rod Carew versus Reggie Jackson, so top 5 years. The thing that's very interesting to me is that in all cases, Rod Carew, his best 5 years are better than the 5 years from Reggie Jackson every year. There isn't one year where Reggie Jackson had a better year in terms of WAR. Top 5 years stacked one over the next. And so, and then total WAR obviously would then favor Rod Carew. Now, if you look at the players, they're obviously very different players. Rod Carew, he was known for being, an average, get on base and steal some bases, don't walk. And if you looked at, he averaged 17, more walks a year than strikeouts, while Reggie Jackson, averaged 50 more strikeouts and walks. So, obviously Carew was an on-base kind of guy. Now, if you look at OPS numbers, OPS, favors Rod Carew over those 5 years. In OPS plus, when you add in all the power numbers from Jackson, are very comparable. They do slightly favor Reggie Jackson. So in the end, these are two very different players, but in the end, Rod Carew was more valuable over his 5 seasons, top seasons, than Reggie Jackson. Now, going into card values, that Jackson was such a important player in the World Series. He was a 2-time MVP, played in New York on the biggest stage in the in the world in terms of baseball. So therefore, his values, are understandably higher because he was just in a bigger media environment and performed at the highest stage. So I understand why his card values would be more expensive, but in a lot of cases they're I think way overpriced compared to Rod Carew. So we'll start there with rookie cards. You can see that even though the Rod Carew, from a percentage standpoint, has gone up in value more than the Reggie Jackson, in general, the Reggie Jackson card has been about $1,200 more expensive every year than the Carew, and that's still that way. In 2019, it was $1,300. In 2021, it's $1,250 more expensive. So even though percentage-wise the Carew has gone up more, total dollars is virtually identical in difference, and they have almost identical pop count with the Carew slightly higher. But I would consider that to be a a statistically significant amount of difference in pop count. So now going on to the 1970s, so the first year where you have a kind of head-to-head comparison of Rod Carew versus Reggie Jackson, you can see that the 1970 Carew is a very economic card. It's $100 today compared to $425 for Reggie, and this card has always been a big delta between the two. And the Reggie has gone up slightly more over the last 3 years than the Carew. Pop counts are virtually identical again. And so, an early 70s card of Rod Carew at $100 is a really good value. And so, therefore, if I was going to compare these two cards, I would definitely buy the Carew. It's a great card to start your Carew collection with, and it won't break the bank. So, moving on to 71. So, 71 is a unique set. And so, to really understand the 71 Topps prices for these two cards, you have to understand, that the set itself has some really interesting dynamics. One is that there is tiering of players based on pop count. So Reggie Jackson's in this, let's say, low pop tier of players that have less than 200 PSA 8s. And therefore, those PSA 8s are worth about $1,400 to $1,500 across the board. You see it with Brooks Robinson, you see it with Johnny Bench, and Reggie Jackson falls in that same amount. Now, the next tier up in terms of pop count are the really popular players that have about 500 or more cards, so 400 to 500 PSA 8s, and that's Nolan Ryan, Roberto Clemente, Willie Mays, and they're worth about the same amount of money, $1,400 to $1,500 today. And those cards have gone up and down. You'll see so many swings in the 71 set. This Reggie Jackson card has brought $3,000 before. Now it's bringing about $1,500. So, $1,400 right now. Now, the Rod Carew is in that tier of 300, above 200 in that 300 tier. So players like Bill Mazeroski, Willie Sturgill, Willie McCovey are in this range, and they're all in this $250 to $300 price. I think Maz is a little lower than that, but they're kind of that third tier. So you got your Willie Mays cards, in that first tier. Because they're just popular Hall of Famers. You've got the short print Hall of Fame players like Johnny Bench and Reggie Jackson. And then you got your super short prints like Thurman Munson. So that are worth even more. So it's like the set's so tiered. Now the reason why that's important is because the Rod Carew is in, again, 300 cards, 324, virtually double of what there is for Reggie Jackson. But if you look at all the cards in totality that are in these pop count ranges and Hall of Famers, both these cards are priced exactly where they should be. Neither card is undervalued or overvalued. So therefore, I would say this is a push. I would not actually buy either one of these cards right now because I think they could go either way. They could lose some value, which the Jackson actually has over time this year. And the Rod Carew at 350 seems a little high for that pop count. So I would not actually buy either one of these cards right now. I think that set is so volatile. I just don't think it's a good idea to be looking at those cards right now and just kind of let it settle a little bit for a while to see where the pop counts come out and pricing. So moving to 72, 72 is a really interesting year for Rod Carew. So it's always, for the most part, been a more expensive card than Reggie Jackson until this year. Now the Jackson's worth more, and you can see it's grown quite a bit in pop count. Now, I attribute this to some things. One, it's not due to pop count. Pop count, it's really high. 500 PSA 8s is a lot for vintage cards. And, when we look at vintage cards themselves, like below 200 is considered low for a PSA 8. 250 or 200 to 350, 400 is considered kind of slightly high but normal, and above 400 is not rare at all. And both these cards are in the not rare at all. But for whatever reason, the Carew was considered to be, more expensive throughout the years. I attribute the Jackson going up in value just because it's a good-looking card. It's got a lot of color, a lot of eye appeal, and the Carew itself is kind of a boring card. Not a lot of color. It's kind of all kind of blends together. So I just view that's the reason the Jackson's worth has gone up, and it's he himself is popular, and this card may have been undervalued in 2020 and it's caught up. So for that reason, again, due to these pop counts, it's a push for me. I would not buy either one of these cards either. I think they are priced appropriately for their pop counts. They're on the high level of pop, meaning that they're not rare. And $250 to $300 is the range for both these cards right now. And I would say that's about what they're worth, and they're not undervalued. I put it that way. So moving to 73, this is where we're starting to see some interesting things happening with pop count. The Reggie Jackson has an enormous pop count, 738. It's just not rare at all. And you can see the pricing actually is down from 2020 to 21, whereas the Rod Carew has slowly gained value. And it's 396 again. It's not. It's below 400, so it's not. Just common as dirt. It's in that kind of mid tier again. Level for PSA 8s. And to me, compared to the Jackson, which is super high pop count, to me it's priced very economically. It's a card that, again, like the 70, you can start your Carew collection without spending $100, and it's got a reasonable pop count. And compared to the Jackson, it's actually something I would actually go and buy. And just from a aesthetic perspective, the 73 Jackson is one of the ugliest Reggie Jackson cards out there. It's just not a nice photo. And I think the Carew looks, like a normal baseball card without the grimace and kind of ugly facial expression that's on the Reggie Jackson. So, all those reasons alone, I would buy this card. I bought this card recently. It's a cool card. It's not going to break the bank, and it's got a reasonable pop count. So moving to 74. 74, again, is a set that always has, high pop counts. Both these are plus 500. However, the Jackson itself has gone up a ton. It's gone up $100 since 2019, and it's got a huge pop count. The Jackson or the Carew has a high pop count, but it actually hasn't gone up in value hardly at all. For that reason, I would again buy the Carew. It's $45. It's not even a $50 card. For the price alone, it's worth picking up because right now with everything so high, finding cards sub $50 of Hall of Famers from the mid 70s. Hey, it's good value. So I think this card again. You can start your Carew collection with the 70, 73, and 74, and you're not even $300 into it, and you've got three really good cards. So I think that is why I think Carew is so undervalued, is that you can actually get a good collection of Carew cards without, breaking the bank, and the 74 is definitely a good value. 75 is very interesting again because of just pop counts. It's below 5, not really rare. 75 is extremely popular. I think both cards are attractive. Um, and I would just say, I think they're still both affordable. I think the 75 set is one of those sets that defies some logic, meaning that pop counts don't affect the desirability of the cards. People just love the set. And with the Carew being a slightly lower pop count, right at $100, you can probably definitely get the card at $100. I would almost buy both cards if they, if I had the chance for these prices. But the Carew, to me it's definitely much lower on the pop count. It's cheaper in price. So again, it's a great card to start anyone's Carew collection with a very popular set, super popular set. So 76 is where we start going to PSA 9. So the way I've always done it is, PSA 8s all the way to 75, and after 75 we go to PSA 9s due to pop counts and pricing. And again, so let's reset ourselves. Anything below 200 cards is is kind of rare. Anything sub 150, so anything below 150 is actually pretty rare in the 70s for most Hall of Famers. So this Carew is in that rare but not super rare pricing, or sorry, availability for PSA 9. The Jackson obviously is above 200, so it's not really that rare. It's just really popular. It's a nice looking photo of him. And the Carew itself is kind of just him in the dugout sitting. It's not as attractive, but it's pretty cheap. And again, it's definitely more rare than the Jackson, and so I would definitely look to pick up the Carew. The 76 Jackson has sold higher than $400 recently too. So it's got some sales recently that are above 400. So it can bring some good money, and so the Jackson itself, to me, is a little overpriced for what it is. It's gone up in price, over 2.5 times since 2019. And the Carew itself started at a very low base, and so it's gone up quite a bit too. But it's still, to me, reasonable for a mid-70s PSA 9. 77 is a really interesting set because, especially for the Jackson, because if you compare the Jackson to the 78, the next card, you'll see that it's priced very low, in my opinion. Now, the 77 Carew, even though it's cheaper, for a 9 has a pretty high pop count. This is a massive pop count for a 70s 9. It's a very attractive card. We'll go with that. So anyone wanting to start their collection with the 77 Carew 9, hey, it's a good card. It's attractive, but it's a high pop count. It's not going to really go up tremendously because it's so available. While the Jackson itself, for a player as popular as Reggie Jackson, to have a sub 200 pop count, so it's in that rare but not super rare category, at 325 is actually a good value, and to me it's undervalued in my opinion. So I would definitely look at buying that 77 Jackson if you can find it. It's hard to find for sale, and I think it's a great card for people to wanting to get a good Reggie Jackson card that's not going to break the bank, that's somewhat rare. Then moving on to 78, and this is where you can really compare the two. You can see that Jackson in 78 has a pop count of 208, but a price tag of $390, and one of these sold just recently for close to $600. So this card on average is bringing about $400, but it's gone as high as $600 recently. So with a pop count higher than the 77, that's priced even lower. So that's why another reason why I like the 77 Jackson, because compared to the 78, which is priced higher with a higher pop count, it's a good value. Now, the 78 Carew is a great card for the price point it's at right now. It's not gone up a ton of money. It's gone up $40 since last year. It's got a sub 150 pop count, so it's in the pretty rare category. It's below 150. So it's rare. Okay, this card's hard to find. 165. Oh my gosh, I wish I could find one. I want to buy one right now. It's a great card. It's at a low pop, good price. This card easily wins the day, especially against that 78 Jackson that just sold for $600 recently. it's a huge value play. So, in summary, from 2019 through 21, you know, average percent gain for Carew is 258. So it's gone 258%. And average cost went from 135 to 346. And so I did include all the way to 1980. So I don't look at cards past 78 because from pop count and pricing, there's not anything that's rare or worth comparing between the two players. I stopped at 78 because that was the last card that really was interesting from a pop count and a rarity perspective. But I included them in this total price average, so you have 79 and 80 in here as well. So 346 today. Now compared to Jackson, who went up a little bit more on average, 286 versus 258. But his 2019 pricing before, obviously the COVID surge hit was almost worth what all the cards for Carew are worth today. So you can see now it's 638. So not double, but close to double. It's getting close to being double what the Carew cards are on average. So again, we know that Rod Carew was as good or better, and in terms of WAR, a better player than Reggie Jackson was, especially during their top 5 years as a career. But Jackson cards are worth double, and again, this is the Yankee factor, the World Series factor. I get it, but Carew is undervalued in my opinion as far as a player. He was a better player overall, and his pricing just doesn't reflect it. Now, if you want to go to the winners for this, for best value, obviously the 78. I love the card. It's the lowest pop card on the report that I'm doing today, my report today. It's got a $300 price gap between the Reggie Jackson, which has a much higher pop count. It's under $200, so it's a value card. I mean, hey, in today's market, getting a low pop great Hall of Famer under $200, that's a deal. And availability is low. Okay, this year alone, it's sold 5 times compared to 14 for the Jackson. So it's basically sold 1/3 the amount of times as the Reggie Jackson. So as far as the best investment, though, it's still his rookie card, and there's a lot of reasons. I mean, first of all, it's already gone up $1,000 this year alone, and recent sales, there's been 3 sales right in that $2,500 range. For this card, it's not tanking in value. It's holding steady, and it's going to keep going up. It's one of the key 60s rookie cards you have to have. If it's a top 5 60s rookie card. It's up there with Tom Seaver and Nolan Ryan and Reggie Jackson. These are the guys you got to have to say you've got the top tier best Hall of Famers of the 60s, Johnny Bench. They're all in that tier, and Rod Carew's card is up there. And as the registry stat for PSA Hall of Famer rookie cards continues to go up, cards like this as top tier 60s Hall of Fame rookie cards are going to continue to really go up in value. So there it is, guys. That's my picks for the overall best Rod Carew cards in terms of investment potential. But don't forget about that the 77 Reggie Jackson. I think that's a great card to buy too. And I love all these cards, and they're all great cards to own, but these are the ones I think have potential. And I'll see you guys next time with my next comparison, and have a great day.